call Portal Williams.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Thank you. It's a great opportunity to be able to speak on this bill, which, as Dr David Clark has said, we are supporting to select committee. And the intent of the bill is positive, but there are certainly some questions that I, as a member of the Health Select Committee, am very keen to investigate, that the Select Committee investigates, because there's no denying, Mr Speaker, when somebody has relinquished their liberty, and also when they are provided treatment potentially without their consent, that there is a fine balance that needs to be struck between their rights as an individual and our rights as a community to safety, and their rights not to be harmed. So it is a balance that we need to get right, and there are some questions that need to be answered in my mind before we can actually get to a point where I am comfortable that this is the right way to track down this supporting people with severe substance addictions. There's no denying that the ADA Act is outdated, and in 1966 I don't think that many of the substances that are being consumed now, or the ways that they are being consumed, would have even been heard of. And you know, in my earlier days, you know, I recall being quite taken aback with where people were consuming glue by sniffing. It was called sniffing. These days, young people are huffing all sorts of manner of substances which were not conceived of in 1966 when the Act first came into effect. Also, society has changed in its attitude to the use of some substances. So there's no doubt we need to update the legislation. But there are, as I pick up on the point that Dr David Clark made, we currently detain around 74 people with severe addiction, substance addiction, and the estimation is that that will go up to around 200 under this legislation, but we don't know for sure. And we can't know for sure until we've tested out several things. And one of the things we need to test out is the assessment on which someone will actually come within the purview of this legislation. So if we're talking about the assessment as will be defined within the legislation, it will be based on three criteria: the severity of the substance abuse, the risk of that individual from significant harm, and whether they've refused treatment. And here is where the concept of compulsion comes into the discussion. Anecdotally, I know that from work I've done in the past, where I've worked with groups who were compelled to attend various sessions, and in this regard I'm talking about young people that might have been compelled to go to groups held by corrections as part of their probation conditions. Anecdotally, it's thought that compulsion is a really important part of the compliance to a treatment and the success of the treatment program. But that's anecdotally, and unfortunately it doesn't appear that we have the evidence that compulsion is a proven pathway to ensuring that someone who's compelled to do a treatment program actually is successful at getting through that program and has a successful result. And here I want to add that the experience of mental health consumers in this regard has not been entirely positive. And mental health consumers will want to, I'm sure, want to contribute and submit to this bill because of their previous experiences. And in that regard, I'm referring to what may have happened in the past around the electroconvulsive therapy, which wasn't for mental health consumers, was something that they were compelled to do, and in many instances was very detrimental to their ongoing mental health. So there is a cautionary tale in that. The treatment also, in discussion with organisations such as CADS, The treatment will be residential, and it will require us to change our way of working with people with addictions due to the provision of wet houses. Now, a wet house is a place where you can safely use a substance until such time that you can wean yourself off that substance, because if you have a serious substance addiction, you cannot go cold turkey. It is very dangerous to do that. So that's a change in the way we would treat people with addictions. And in my view, it's actually an option that could be open to a whole lot of other people who have substance abuses, not just the most at risk of severe harm. It is a method that's used overseas. It's not something we use here, but it is certainly something that the Health Select Committee could look at as options for treatment for people with other levels of substance addiction. This bill also tends not to include the comorbidities that go along with somebody who has a serious substance addiction. And here I'm talking about mental illness, talking about family violence, sexual abuse and other social harms. We cannot see this person in isolation only around their addiction. We have to actually review the whole environment that this person lives within. Neither can we actually then discharge somebody back into an environment that is completely unsafe, because that will mean that they are then triggered by whatever is in their environment, and we potentially will not get a successful treatment option for that person. So I am hoping that the Select Committee within the purview of this legislation will be able to ask questions of health officials about what is going to be provided for somebody post-treatment so that they can have a successful reintegration back into the community. There is, I want to refer to the regulatory impact statement. There is a reference to not including the criterion of significant harm to others within the bill. And I just want to quote that they, in the regulatory impact statement, they say existing legislation directed at child protection, family violence and other criminal behaviour is available to deal with situations when behaviour arising from substance addiction results in a risk to serious harm of others. And that concerns me that serious harm to others is not part of this legislation. And I want to refer to the Mental Health Compulsory Assessment and Treatment Act 1992, where serious harm to others is part of that legislation. So for me, I'm concerned that someone who is under a compulsory treatment order who is mentally unwell has a component of risk to others within their assessment. However, somebody who has a serious substance abuse addiction does not have serious harm to others as part of their assessment. I think we are missing an opportunity here to ensure that such things, such as children who are in homes where methamphetamine is being manufactured, for example, is a significant risk to that child or that young person. It's my belief that as the Health Select Committee we should examine that as something that we should include in the legislation. Mr. Speaker, there is much more I could say, but I just want to, in conclusion, talk about the Health and Disability Code of Rights, because there are elements of this legislation which are in breach of those Code of Rights. The right to freedom from discrimination, coercion, harassment and exploitation. The coercion aspect of right 2 does come into play here. Right 6, the right to be fully informed. When somebody does have a compulsory treatment order imposed upon them, they are not completely informed. Right 7, the right to make an informed choice. There is also an aspect of not being fully informed and being able to give your permission, and right to number 10, the right to complain. I understand the District Inspector's Service will be part of this legislation, and hopefully anyone who is ordered to treatment as part of this legislation actually has the option to complain. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I commend the bill to the House. Thank you.